A powerful tycoon left 3 Marines tied in the desert, but a German shepherd refused to let them die. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to the main character. The sun hangs high over the American Southwest, a white disk pressing its weight onto miles of open desert where the air shimmers and distances lie. Somewhere far from paved roads and cell service, 3 U.S. Marines sit bound together beneath a lone strip of fading shade cast by a weathered rock outcrop. Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole keeps his posture steady despite the heat, counting breaths the way he was trained, measuring time by the slow crawl of shadows across the sand. Corporal Mark Davis squints toward the horizon, not searching for rescue so much as reminding himself that horizons always mean direction. Lance Corporal Noah Ramirez swallows carefully, conserving strength, listening to the wind as it moves through scrub and carries the dry scent of dust and sun-baked earth. They are not panicking. Marines rarely do. But each of them understands the math of the desert, how water disappears faster than hope, how a single hour can feel like 10 when the temperature pushes past 100 degrees and the ground itself seems to radiate heat back into your bones. Somewhere else, far away from this silence, a powerful man named Richard Hale believes the desert will finish a problem for him, neat and quiet, the way money often does. He believes the story ends here. It does not. Because not far from the Marines, beyond a low rise of sand and stone, a German shepherd named Atlas lifts his head. His ears angle forward, catching a sound humans would miss, a subtle shift in the wind, a familiar rhythm of breathing carried across the open land. Atlas does not understand titles like Tycoon or concepts like leverage. He understands scent, loyalty, and the difference between right and wrong the way only animals can, without language but with absolute clarity. He stands, muscles tightening beneath his coat, amber eyes fixed on a direction that matters. The desert offers no comfort to him either, only heat and distance, but Atlas steps forward anyway, paws pressing into sand that burns, because standing still is not an option. Ethan Cole feels the change before he sees it, a presence at the edge of awareness, a shape against the light that does not belong to rock or brush. He lifts his chin slightly, not daring to hope, just acknowledging that something has shifted. In that vast, unforgiving place, where money has no voice and threats carry no weight, the smallest truth begins to assert itself. Survival does not always come from power. Sometimes it comes from a bond that refuses to break, from a loyal heart moving steadily across the desert, guided not by greed or fear, but by the simple, unshakable decision to not let his people die. The desert does not change quickly, but time does, and as the minutes pass the light shifts from harsh white to a deeper gold that presses down just as hard. Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole keeps his eyes forward, blinking slowly to protect them from the glare, grounding himself in routine the way Marines are taught when everything else is stripped away. He listens to the sound of breathing beside him, Mark Davis steady but shallow, Noah Ramirez slower now, each breath and effort measured and careful. Ethan speaks when needed, his voice low and even, reminding them to stay present, to focus on what is real, not on how far help might be. He tells them where the sun sits, how long the shadows have moved, anchoring them to the moment. Somewhere beyond the heat shimmer, Atlas moves with quiet purpose, nose close to the ground, reading the land like a map written in scent and memory. The desert offers little guidance, but Atlas does not hesitate. He follows the faintest trail, the familiar trace of the men he knows, layered beneath dust and dry air, trusting instinct over distance. Each step sends a small puff of sand into the air, his paws aching, his tongue dry, but stopping is never part of the calculation. He remembers training days that ended with a hand on his neck and a calm voice in his ear, remembers the feeling of belonging that never wavered. That memory carries him forward. Back at the rock outcrop, Ethan notices the wind shift and with it a sound that does not belong to the desert's usual rhythm. It is subtle, almost imagined, but it sharpens his focus. He lifts his chin again, eyes narrowing against the light, and for a moment hope flickers, not as relief, but as resolve. Mark senses it too, the way Marines do without words, and straightens slightly despite the strain. Noah swallows and listens, forcing himself to stay awake, telling himself that staying conscious is a task, just like any other. The sun dips lower, the temperature easing by degrees that feel like mercy, and the desert stretches on, indifferent but no longer entirely silent. Atlas crests a low ridge and pauses, scanning, ears forward, body still. There, ahead, the scent grows stronger, unmistakable now, and with it comes the faint outline of 3 figures against the sand. His tail lifts once, not in excitement, but in certainty. He moves again, faster now, every instinct aligned. Ethan sees him then, a shape resolving into something real, something impossible and undeniable. He does not shout. He does not struggle against the bindings. He simply exhales, a long, controlled breath, and lets the moment settle. The desert has not won yet. Atlas closes the distance, eyes fixed on the men, on Ethan most of all, and in that final stretch there is no thought of heat or miles or thirst, only the simple truth that loyalty has brought him here, and loyalty will not allow him to turn back. Atlas stops a few yards away, not rushing, not barking, his chest rising and falling as he takes in the scene with calm focus. Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole meets the dog's gaze and something unspoken passes between them, a recognition built over years of shared discipline and trust. Ethan shifts his weight carefully, testing the bindings without panic, knowing sudden movement would waste strength. Atlas circles once, slow and deliberate, sniffing the air and the ground, understanding more than anyone would expect. He lowers his head and nudges Mark Davis first, a brief touch meant to reassure rather than excite, then moves to Noah Ramirez, whose eyes flutter open wider at the contact. Noah manages a faint smile, the kind that says he understands exactly who has arrived. The desert hums softly around them, wind brushing against rock and scrub, the sun easing lower toward the horizon. Atlas steps back and lifts his head, letting out a controlled, measured bark that carries just far enough to matter, not frantic, not loud, but purposeful. Ethan knows that sound. It is the signal Atlas uses when he needs attention, when there is work to be done. Somewhere beyond the ridge, beyond the curve of land that hides roads and structures, that sound begins a chain of small reactions. Atlas turns and looks once more at the men, then pivots and trots away, glancing back to ensure he is followed by understanding, not feet. He moves with urgency now, but not recklessness, choosing a path that avoids loose stone and deep sand, conserving energy the way training taught him. Ethan watches him go, counting the seconds, trusting the process because trust is sometimes all a Marine has left. Mark leans his shoulder slightly toward Ethan, sharing balance and warmth, and murmurs that the dog always did know when things mattered. Ethan allows himself a brief nod, then refocuses on the horizon. Time stretches again, but it feels different now, not empty, but occupied by expectation. Atlas reaches a familiar point where the scent of vehicles lingers faintly, a place where the land bears the quiet marks of human presence. He pauses, lifts his head, and repeats the bark, stronger this time, layered with urgency that carries across the open space. The sound finds ears that understand it, people who know that when a working dog calls like that, it is not a mistake. Back at the outcrop, the temperature drops a few degrees as the sun continues its descent, and the light softens from harsh glare to long, amber lines. Noah exhales slowly, steadying himself, repeating Ethan's words about staying present. Ethan tracks the movement of shadows again, grounding himself, but this time there is a different weight in his chest, not fear, not doubt, but certainty. The desert still stretches wide and indifferent, but it no longer feels final. Atlas waits at the edge of the open land, ears forward, body still, ready to guide whoever answers his call. He does not pace. He does not whine. He stands as he was trained to stand, confident that the right response is already on its way. The first sign is not a vehicle or a voice, but a shift in the air. A low vibration that settles into the ground and travels through stone and sand like a promise. Atlas lifts his head, ears locking forward, posture steady, the way he stands when confirmation replaces instinct. He turns and moves at a measured pace, guiding rather than fleeing, tracing a line back toward the outcrop with confidence earned through training and trust. At the rocks, Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole feels it too, the faint tremor under his boots, and he allows himself a single, slow breath that he has been holding for far too long. He keeps his voice calm, speaking to Mark Davis and Noah Ramirez with the same tone he used on long nights overseas, reminding them to stay still, to conserve, to let things unfold. The light has softened now, the sky stretching wide and open, painted in muted oranges and pale blue, the temperature easing enough to bring clarity back to tired minds. Atlas appears over the rise first, not alone this time, pausing to look back and then forward again, his body angled like an arrow pointing the way. Beyond him, shapes emerge where there were none before, silhouettes resolving into people who move with purpose and caution, following the dog without question. Ethan watches the approach without relief flooding his senses, because Marines do not surrender control even at the edge of rescue. He catalogues details, the pace, the spacing, the way Atlas keeps checking back, ensuring alignment. Mark shifts carefully, adjusting his balance, and Noah closes his eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to steady his breathing. When the group reaches them, words are exchanged quietly, efficiently, voices low and respectful, as if the desert itself deserves courtesy. Hands work with care, unhurried but precise, easing restraints without rush, understanding that patience matters as much as speed. Atlas stays close, moving only when needed, watching Ethan's face, waiting for a signal that everything is as it should be. Ethan nods once, a small motion that carries weight, and Atlas relaxes just enough to let his tail move in a restrained arc. Water is offered slowly, measured, sipped rather than swallowed, and Ethan ensures Noah drinks first, then Mark, enforcing order even now, because order is how they survived. The sky continues its slow transition, the sun dipping lower, the desert cooling inch by inch, and with it the sharp edge of danger recedes. No one speaks of who left them here or why. There will be time for truth later. For now, there is only the quiet competence of people doing the right thing and a dog who refused to accept a different ending. Atlas sits beside Ethan as they prepare to move, his body pressed lightly against the Marine's leg, a solid, living anchor. Ethan rests a hand on the dog's neck, not in thanks, but in acknowledgement, because gratitude feels unnecessary between partners who understand their roles. As they turn away from the outcrop and begin the careful journey back across the open land, the desert stretches behind them, vast and unchanged, holding its silence, while ahead the path narrows into something clear and certain, shaped not by power or money, but by loyalty that showed up when it mattered most. The journey away from the outcrop unfolds slowly, measured in careful steps and steady breaths, the kind that rebuild strength rather than drain it. Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole walks at the center, posture upright despite fatigue, his focus split between the men beside him and the German shepherd pacing just ahead. Atlas moves with quiet assurance, scanning the land not as a threat but as terrain, reading slopes and shadows the way others read maps. The desert at dusk feels different now, cooler, almost reflective, as if acknowledging a story it did not finish telling. Mark Davis keeps his eyes forward, absorbing the simple relief of movement, while Noah Ramirez steadies himself with each step, the haze lifting from his thoughts as hydration and air do their work. No one speaks much. Words feel unnecessary, heavy in a space that has already tested them enough. As they reach the waiting vehicles, the engines idle softly, a low, comforting sound that signals continuity, not urgency. Atlas pauses before climbing in, turning back once more to look at the stretch of land they are leaving behind, his ears twitching as if committing it to memory. Ethan notices and places a hand on the dog's shoulder, grounding both of them in the present. The drive out is smooth, the tires humming against packed earth before reaching pavement, the sky darkening inch by inch into deep blue scattered with early stars. Inside the vehicle, the Marines sit quietly, the tension of survival easing into something heavier but safer, the weight of knowing how close the margin had been. Atlas settles at Ethan's feet, his breathing steady, eyes alert but calm, the posture of a job completed without fanfare. Hours later, under artificial light that hums softly overhead, the world feels structured again, predictable. Water is replaced with warm drinks, simple food offered slowly, and conversation resumes in fragments, low and practical. Ethan answers questions when needed, not embellishing, not assigning blame, simply stating facts as they are known. There is mention of names, of responsibility, of processes that will follow, but those details remain distant, secondary to the present moment of being alive and together. Atlas receives attention from several hands, each touch respectful, brief, as if everyone understands that this dog did not act for praise. When Ethan finally sits alone for a moment, Atlas presses closer, resting his head against Ethan's leg. Ethan exhales, the sound carrying months of tension he had not realized he was holding, and scratches gently behind the dog's ears. He does not say thank you. He says the dog's name instead, softly, the way you speak to someone who already knows. Outside, night settles fully, the desert a dark, expansive shape beyond the lights, silent again but no longer threatening. Somewhere far away, decisions will be questioned and answers demanded, but here, now, there is only the steady presence of a loyal animal and 3 Marines who walked away from a place they were never meant to leave alive. Atlas lifts his head once, eyes meeting Ethan's, and in that quiet exchange there is no triumph, only confirmation. They did what they were meant to do, and sometimes, that is enough. Morning arrives quietly, not with urgency but with structure, the kind that restores balance after chaos. Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole wakes before the lights change, a habit etched deep, and for a moment he forgets where he is until the steady presence at his feet reminds him. Atlas lifts his head, eyes calm, tail still, waiting for the day to begin. Outside, the air is cooler, carrying the faint scent of dust and asphalt, and the desert feels far away now, like a memory that refuses to fade completely. Ethan moves through the routine deliberately, checking on Mark Davis and Noah Ramirez, both stronger, more alert, their color returning, their voices steadier. Conversations begin to take shape around them, not dramatic, not loud, but purposeful. Names are written down. Timelines are confirmed. Locations marked. Questions asked with respect and answered with clarity. Ethan keeps his responses precise, knowing that truth does not need decoration. Atlas stays close, occasionally shifting position, observing the flow of people the way he observes terrain, calm but attentive. As the hours pass, the weight of what happened begins to settle into something heavier than exhaustion. It is the understanding that someone chose the desert as a solution, believing silence could be purchased and distance could erase responsibility. Ethan hears the name Richard Hale spoken more than once, always with the same measured tone, never anger, because anger would be easy and imprecise. Facts are what matter now. Evidence moves through hands and systems that do not rush, systems designed to outlast wealth and influence. Mark sits nearby, listening, occasionally adding a detail, his voice steady, while Noah watches Atlas with a quiet gratitude that words would cheapen. Later, as the sun climbs higher, Ethan steps outside with Atlas, letting the dog stretch and breathe freely. The sound of traffic hums in the distance, ordinary and reassuring. Atlas looks up at Ethan, ears flicking, and Ethan kneels, meeting him at eye level, resting a hand against the dog's chest, feeling the solid rhythm beneath. He thinks about how close things came to ending differently, how thin the line was between disappearance and return, and how that line was held by something that cannot be bought or threatened. News begins to circulate quietly, not headlines yet, just movement, just accountability taking shape in rooms where decisions matter. Ethan does not follow every detail. He does not need to. Justice, when it is real, does not require an audience. It requires patience and light. As afternoon fades, the desert appears again on the horizon, distant and muted, no longer a place of fear but a reminder. Atlas lies down at Ethan's side, content, his work complete, his loyalty unquestioned. Ethan rests his back against the wall, eyes forward, breathing even, aware that the story is not over, but the ending is no longer in doubt. Somewhere, consequences are unfolding, steady and unavoidable, not driven by anger or revenge, but by truth finally reaching the surface. And here, in the quiet between duties, a Marine and a German shepherd share the kind of silence that only comes after survival, when the world keeps moving and you are still here to move with it. Time moves forward with a quiet certainty, the kind that does not announce itself but leaves evidence everywhere it passes. Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole feels it in the shift of daily routines returning to normal, in the way Mark Davis jokes softly again, and in how Noah Ramirez stands a little taller, strength restored without ceremony. Atlas remains constant through it all, a steady presence that does not seek attention, content to observe from Ethan's side as conversations grow more formal and less frequent. Meetings happen behind closed doors, paperwork travels between offices, and the name Richard Hale surfaces with increasing regularity, now surrounded by dates, records, and questions that cannot be ignored. Ethan is asked to recount events again, and again he does so plainly, without emphasis, because truth does not require persuasion. Each retelling sharpens the outline of what occurred, and with clarity comes momentum. Atlas listens in his own way, ears flicking at familiar voices, calm and unbothered, as if he understands that his part is finished and the rest belongs to systems built for moments like this. Days pass, and news begins to settle into the background, no longer rumors but confirmed developments that carry weight without spectacle. Ethan reads brief updates when they cross his path, never lingering, trusting that accountability does not need his supervision. What matters is the present, the simple reality of waking up safe, of stepping outside into air that feels neutral rather than hostile. One afternoon, Ethan walks with Atlas along a quiet perimeter road, the sun warm but not oppressive, the sky wide and clear. Atlas trots beside him, relaxed, occasionally glancing up, checking in the way he always has. Ethan thinks about the desert, not with fear, but with perspective, understanding now how close silence came to winning and how loyalty changed the outcome. He stops near a fence line, resting his hands on his hips, and Atlas sits at his side, mirroring the pause. There is no need for words. Later, Mark and Noah join them, conversation light, the kind that acknowledges survival without being defined by it. They speak of home, of plans delayed and now possible again, of small things that suddenly feel important. Atlas moves between them, accepting brief pats, then settles again near Ethan, satisfied. As evening approaches, the horizon glows softly, and the desert, far in the distance, fades into shadow, its power diminished by distance and daylight. Somewhere beyond sight, consequences continue to unfold, measured and deliberate, driven by facts rather than outrage. Ethan knows that wealth and influence lose their edge when exposed to steady light, and that truth, once seen, does not retreat. He looks down at Atlas and nods slightly, a gesture of respect between partners. Atlas responds by leaning in, a quiet affirmation. The world has not changed dramatically, but something essential has been corrected, a balance restored not by force but by refusal, the refusal to abandon those who cannot walk away alone. As night settles and the stars appear one by one, Ethan remains still for a moment longer, breathing evenly, aware that survival is not the end of a story, but the beginning of responsibility. Atlas rests beside him, eyes half closed, content in the knowledge that he did exactly what he was meant to do, and that sometimes, that is how justice begins. The weeks that follow do not arrive with fanfare, but with steady confirmation that actions have consequences when truth is allowed to stand on its own. Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole notices the change in the air around him, not dramatic, but unmistakable, as conversations grow quieter and more certain. Reports finalize. Statements align. What once felt like a shadowed question now carries the clarity of documented fact. Ethan does not celebrate this shift. He observes it the way a Marine observes weather, acknowledging the direction without trying to control it. Atlas remains at his side through these days, his routine unchanged, his confidence unshaken, as if he understands that justice, like training, works best when it is consistent. One afternoon, Ethan receives confirmation that the process has reached its inevitable conclusion, that the influence once believed untouchable has been measured against evidence and found wanting. The words are plain, procedural, but their weight settles deep. Ethan nods once and closes the file, feeling neither triumph nor anger, only a quiet sense of alignment, as if something slightly off in the world has been corrected. He steps outside with Atlas, the sun warm but gentle, the sky wide and forgiving. They walk a familiar path, boots and paws moving in sync, the rhythm comfortable and unforced. Ethan thinks back to the desert, to the stillness that almost became permanent, and understands now how close absence came to replacing presence. He also understands how fragile power truly is when stripped of witnesses and confronted by loyalty that refuses silence. Atlas pauses near a patch of shade, sits, and looks up at Ethan, his eyes steady. Ethan crouches, resting his forearms on his knees, meeting that gaze without words. In that moment, the memory of heat and thirst and distance loses its edge, transformed into something instructive rather than haunting. Mark Davis and Noah Ramirez remain in touch, their lives gradually filling again with plans and motion, the past no longer a weight but a reference point. They speak of Atlas often, not with exaggeration, but with respect, acknowledging the truth without needing to elevate it. As evening approaches, Ethan and Atlas return indoors, the familiar sounds of routine settling around them. The world continues as it always has, indifferent and complex, but within that complexity exists a simple line that was not crossed because someone refused to step away. Ethan prepares for rest, Atlas circling once before lying down, his body relaxed, his work complete. The silence that fills the room is not empty. It is earned. Outside, the desert remains where it has always been, vast and quiet, but its claim has been answered, not with force, but with presence. Ethan closes his eyes knowing that survival was only the first responsibility, and that choosing to speak, to remember, and to stand firm completed the rest. Atlas breathes steadily nearby, a constant reminder that loyalty does not need recognition to matter, and that sometimes the most powerful justice begins with a single decision to move forward instead of turning away. The story does not end with celebration or applause, but with something quieter and more lasting. Life settles into its natural rhythm again, and Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole finds comfort in the ordinary details that once felt fragile. Morning light through a window, the sound of boots on concrete, the familiar weight of responsibility returning without fear. Atlas remains nearby, always present, not as a reminder of danger, but as proof that endurance leaves its mark in calm rather than noise. Ethan reflects on how easily the desert could have erased them, how silence almost became the final word, and how a single refusal changed the outcome. He understands now that survival is not only about strength or preparation, but about connection, about being seen by someone who does not look away when things become inconvenient. Mark Davis and Noah Ramirez move forward with their lives, carrying the experience not as a burden, but as a quiet truth that reshapes priorities. They check in from time to time, conversations brief but sincere, anchored by shared understanding rather than shared trauma. Atlas continues his routine with steady confidence, greeting each day without expectation, content in the simplicity of belonging. Ethan watches him sometimes, noting how the dog rests without worry, how loyalty expresses itself most clearly in peace. The desert appears again in memory, not as a place of threat, but as a lesson, vast and impartial, reminding Ethan that power without conscience is temporary, and that control dissolves when faced with unwavering presence. He recognizes that the most meaningful justice did not come from confrontation, but from exposure, from the slow and inevitable movement of truth into light. As seasons change, the experience fades into the background of daily duty, but it never disappears. It informs decisions, tempers assumptions, and reinforces the value of standing firm when walking away would be easier. Atlas ages with grace, his movements slightly slower, his eyes just as sharp, and Ethan adapts naturally, matching pace, respecting the bond that has grown deeper without needing acknowledgement. There are moments, often in the quiet before sleep, when Ethan considers how close absence came to replacing everything he knows, and how loyalty intervened without hesitation. He does not dramatize these thoughts. He lets them settle, shaping gratitude rather than fear. The world continues as it always has, complicated and imperfect, but within it exists proof that integrity can still alter outcomes. Ethan understands that not every injustice is corrected, and not every voice is heard, but he also knows that refusing to abandon what is right creates ripples that reach farther than expected. Atlas lies nearby, breathing steady, content in the simple truth that he stayed when it mattered. In that shared silence, there is no need for explanation or resolution. The meaning is clear without words. Sometimes, the smallest act of loyalty preserves more than lives. It preserves faith in what still works when everything else fails. And sometimes, that is enough to carry forward, one steady step at a time.